Episode 4 of the plan. Example job losses due to modernisation. In this episode I will try to explain in some instances of where jobs have been lost due to modernisation. In some ways it was a good thing, but there are areas that could have been retained due to the type of services if it were a service being wiped, like customer service, or if it affected general safety and security. And so we'll try to give you a few examples here. So let's begin with boilermakers. Boilermakers and boiler mechanics these days have in most ways been phased out and only still pertain to certain areas today due to modernisation. True that this is something that did pave the way to an improvement, however there are areas that have been affected that still could have remained or should have remained in order for there to be more employment available. People that work in the big supermarkets or department store checkouts are gradually being phased out for the so-called user-friendly, more modern way with the new self-serve card systems. I've seen several of these large stores that once employed about 10 people to work at the registers, but now only maintain a skeleton crew of staff like 2 people. Then you think with how these are being phased out is removing more of the general labour jobs, the type that don't necessarily require an expensive course to gain employment, the starting block for young workers just getting into the workforce. This trend does not help other than to increase the money flow for a time into a CEO's pockets. Does not do well for customer service, something that seems to be draining out in today's world. Other phased out jobs in many countries include such positions as I illustrate here. Tram conductors and ticket inspectors equal ticket machines. On many railway stations, what used to have a ticket counter with the ticket sellers that would sell and punch your ticket ready for departure are now being replaced by ticket machines. Ticket sellers equals ticket machines. Guards equals security cameras that are linked to a security hub which would monitor and record a network of stations. And porters, the ones who would handle your bags and help you into the trains, no longer exist in today's changed world other than on preservation lines. Station masters also have vanished, leaving most railway stations around the world unmanned. As many of these stations today, we'll call them bus shelters, since the traditional station buildings in many places, including some in the Philippines, are being demolished and replaced with small bus shelter style boxes that have a ticket machine located on one side. What I've illustrated here is only one example, as many more could be thought up, but then to go through listing them all would overrun this video and the main purpose of this production. However, that is one example for positions that have been phased out in many countries in the name of progress. In some ways this has been good, but also as these are being phased out, it then leaves many more workers without a job and without a qualification that may be acceptable to gain new work somewhere else, if they had not been given a chance to shift positions by their then employer. Okay, here I will give you a rather wild example on how a sudden over-need for local jobs and services would need to be filled. As I said, this is just a wild example, but it's one very similar to how the world managed in the old days as per 30 years ago and earlier. And I'm not saying that to be this extreme today would be the entire answer neither, so bear with me with this illustrated example. Say there was a sudden decision overnight by a government to call a cancellation on all imports. What would happen is that there would suddenly be a huge stockpile of jobs, services, businesses that would need to be created and filled locally in order to still meet the needs of the country. Unemployment would then go down drastically and money would then be retained in the country, Local profits would rise and consumer confidence would also increase. But this is really how countries in the world grew and survived, at least prior to 30 years ago. But do we need to go that far today? Since today's world has changed and embraced on imports heavily. Is there still a way to marry this through? The example I illustrated above was a little extreme to the standards of today, but it was, you could say, one idea that, given the case, would enable a more local recovery. It's interesting, though, that with the above example I just illustrated, that it's not that far from how it used to be. One of the main causes of the collapse of this world economy is that since we have invested by way spread across the globe our markets, it has created a rather risky situation, which in the end has led us into this position. By intertwining ourselves into the mesh of other countries, we have opened ourselves to what is known as the domino effect. As one country loses, the next one follows, and thus it keeps spreading until it reaches us. This is what's happening now. Since we have intertwined our business fabric, we have become a part of the same mesh. 30 years ago, if one country fell down, no one else would have been affected, as it was not a worldwide issue, since we did not have the same level of connection or the reliance of imports and stock through worldwide trade compared to what we have today. Back then, local jobs and confidence was supported and highly appreciated. There was a little thing called on-the-job training. Company takeovers worldwide were not given priority in those days, and countries grew as they supported their own local people. This all changed when the stock markets went further worldwide, and we entered the more digital age and pushed more on worldwide trade, which is where greed really began to take hold. This can be turned around. I know it can. As I have mentioned before, and I will add to that, I respect people's opinions as we all have our own ideas. I respect that. I hope with this that I can help to get you thinking whether you agree or not. What I'm trying to say here is, if we can all can think of ideas and ways, we may just be able to begin solving all of these problems, if only we could get the right minds that have those resources. Now, I'm not from any party, and only one voice. It won't take one person to make this change, but we all can do it. If we just look at one step at a time, we could then guide ourselves gradually out of this problem. And the same goes for all the other problems facing this world. Well, that's my 4th episode of the plan. Hope I have helped to enjoy some thinking after giving some thoughts to recognising the issues and how it may have been caused.